everybody. It is time for Stories with Mrs. Reed, and we will pick up where we left off in Wayside School Gets a Little Stranger. We are on chapter 21, Open Wide. The good news, Jason got to leave school early. The bad news, he had a dentist appointment. I'll never eat candy again, he promised the tooth god as he headed down the stairs. And I'll brush my teeth after every meal. I promise. Even if it's just a snack. I'll bring my toothbrush to school. Just please, please don't let him find any cavities. I've heard that song before, answered a voice inside his head. Every time you go to the dentist, it's the same thing. But then, a week later, you're eating candy and forgetting to brush your teeth. This time, I really, really mean it, Jason promised. Too late, said the voice. An hour later, Jason was lying on his back in the dentist's chair. Open, said the dentist. His dentist was named Dr. Payne. She had long fingers and even longer fingernails. Jason opened his big mouth. He had the second biggest mouth in his class. Wider, said Dr. Payne. Jason stretched his mouth until his cheeks hurt. That's good, said Dr. Payne. Now just a little bit wider. The veins in Jason's neck bulged out as he stretched his mouth even wider. His eyes watered. His throat was dry. Okay, just hold it like that, said Dr. Payne. She turned on the sucking machine and put a tube in Jason's mouth. The machine made a gagging noise as it sucked up the last drop of moisture. As Dr. Payne poked around at his teeth, she said, and oh my, several times. So how do you like school, she asked. Ah, said Jason. What grade are you in? Aha, said Jason. Well, just remember, said Dr. Payne, it's very important to always listen to your teachers and do whatever they say. She poked a tooth with a long, pointed dentist tool. Ah, Jason screamed in agony. Did that hurt? Asked Dr. Payne. Jason shook his head. If he told her it hurt, she might think it was a cavity. If she couldn't find it herself, he certainly wasn't going to tell her about it. Are you sure? Asked Dr. Payne. She poked the same spot. This time, Jason didn't make a sound. Tears and sweat dripped down his face. The receptionist came into the room. Yes, said Dr. Payne. Jason was glad for the break. Kendall's mother is on the phone, said the receptionist. She refuses to pay her bill. What? Exclaimed Dr. Payne. How dare! She says you pulled the wrong tooth. Give me the phone, shouted Dr. Payne. The receptionist handed it to her. This is Dr. Payne. What do you mean you're not paying your bill? Well then, just bring Kendall back in here and I'll put that one and I'll pull that one too. I'll pull them all, but you still have to pay me. Your lawyer? I don't care what your lawyer said. You can tell your lawyer to rub a monkey's tummy. You heard me. Rub a monkey's tummy with your head. She slammed down the phone. Jason looked at the diploma hanging on the wall. Before his dentist got married, her name was Jane Smith. His big mouth opened wider. Chapter 22, Jane Smith. I found Jane Smith, Jason told Stephen the next morning when he got to school. You better tell Dee Dee, said Stephen. They hurried across the playground. A whistle blew. No running, ordered Mr. Lewis, the professional playground supervisor. Now I want both of you to go back to the edge of the blacktop and walk this time. The boys went back the way they came, then came back the way they went. Dee Dee was sitting on a bench. She had been benched by Mr. Lewis for excessive noise-making. I found Jane Smith, Jason whispered as he walked past her. Dee Dee and Jason entered the classroom together. Mrs. Drizzle was seated behind her desk. As they passed in front of her, Dee Dee stopped and said, Did you have a nice time at the dentist yesterday, Jason? Yes, Dee Dee, said Jason. It was very nice. I wonder if we have the same dentist, said Dee Dee. What is your dentist's name? Her name is Dr. Payne, said Jason, but that hasn't always been her name. It hasn't? Asked Dee Dee. Oh no, said Jason. Before she was married, her name was Jane Smith. Jane Smith? Asked Dee Dee. Is that spelled Janesmith? Yes, that's how you spell Jane Smith, said Jason. But like I said, that's not her name anymore. Her name is Dr. Payne. She works at the dentist office at 124 Garden Street. They took their seats. Late that afternoon, Dr. Payne finished work and walked out of her office. It had been a good day. She had drilled 25 teeth. She made $60 for every tooth she drilled. 25 times $60 is $1,500. Not bad for a day's work. Of course, not all the teeth really had cavities. But how would any of her patients find out? She got into her fancy silver and black sports car and drove away. She sang along with the radio. She didn't even notice the old beat-up green station wagon in her rearview mirror. She lived in a mansion next to the lake. There was a stone wall around the house. She pressed a button in her car and an iron gate opened. The gate closed behind her as she headed up the long and winding driveway. A moment later, the old green station wagon stopped and parked next to the gate. A woman got out, walked around the back, and opened the tailgate. She pulled out a ladder. She set the ladder up against the wall. Under her arm, she carried an old blue notebook. Dr. Payne's butler handed her a drink. The cook was making dinner. Dr. Payne's dog, cat, and husband were waiting for her in the den. Her dog's name was Brussels, and her cat's name was Sprouts. She petted them both. Her husband's name was Sham. She petted him too. "Hi, darling. How was your day?" he asked. "I made $1,500, said Jane. They hugged and kissed. They loved each other, but they loved money even more. Then they had dinner by candlelight as they watched the sun set over the lake. After dinner, they set out on the deck under the stars. Sprouts lay purring on Jane's lap. Brussels sat faithfully by her side. Life was perfect. "I love you, darling," she said, petting Sprouts. "And I love you," said Sham. "I was talking to the cat," said Jane. The butler stopped out on the deck. "Excuse me, madam," he said, "but there's an elderly woman out in the yard." Jane's long fingernails dug into her cat's neck. "I wonder how she got past the gate," said Sham. "I don't know, sir," said the butler. "She's probably hungry. Perhaps I can give her some leftover—" "No!" shouted Jane. "Get rid of her!" "No, let me have a look," said Sham. He followed the butler back into the house. He returned a moment later. "Darling, you'll never guess who's here. One of your former teachers. Isn't that just the sweetest?" Jane screamed. She jumped to her feet. Sprouts flew off her lap and into the hot tub. "What's wrong?" asked Sham. "You idiot!" shouted Jane. "I told you to get rid of her." She kicked her dog out of the way, then climbed over the railing and jumped off the deck to the ground, 15 feet below. Mrs. Drizzle came out onto the deck. "You can't get away from me, young lady," she hollered. Jane hurt her ankle pretty badly when she hit the ground. It was either sprained or broken. She lay on the ground in agony as she looked up at her former teacher. "You have homework to do," said Mrs. Drizzle, looking down at her. Jane's face twisted with pain. "Rub a monkey's tummy," she shouted, then struggled to her feet. She had a suitcase stashed in the boathouse, just in case this ever happened. She hobbled to it, grabbed it, then limped down to the lake, dragging her suitcase behind her. Mrs. Drizzle hurried down the steps on the side of the deck. Jane groaned as she threw her suitcase onto a motorboat. Then she pulled herself aboard and started the engine. "Darling, come back!" Sham shouted from the deck as he watched the boat sputter across the water. Mrs. Drizzle climbed into an old rowboat. "I'll find you, Jane Smith," she shouted into the darkness. "You can run, but you can't hide." Jane's voice echoed back across the black water. "Rub a monkey's tummy with your head!" And neither of them was ever seen again. Chapter 23, Ears. Wendy had 3. Ears, I mean. She had 1 ear on each side of her head, just like most people. But she also had a 3rd ear, which lay flat on top of her head. You couldn't see it. It was completely covered by her thick, frizzy brown hair. She was an intelligent and lovely young woman. She was gentle and kind. At least, she used to be. Then she met Xavier and became evil and wicked. But I'll get to that later. She lived in a small apartment in the big city. She always kept fresh flowers in the vase on her kitchen table. She didn't have any friends. She was afraid someone might find out about her ear. She was very embarrassed by it. The one on top of her head, I mean. The other two ears were pretty as ears go. Actually, the third ear wasn't ugly. In fact, it looked just like her other two. It was quantity, not quality, that bothered her. Then she met Xavier. It was at a museum. They happened to be standing next to each other, looking at the same painting, the Mona Lisa. A guard stood by to make sure they didn't touch it. Xavier was very handsome, but he was frightfully shy. He was afraid of women. "That's a beautiful painting, isn't it?" said Wendy. Xavier blushed. He wanted to speak, but his mouth locked shut with fear. It took all his courage just to nod his head. But Wendy knew he liked her, because there was something else about her ear I haven't told you yet. The one on top of her head, I mean. It didn't hear normal sounds. It heard people's brains. Wendy was able to listen to Xavier's secret thoughts, and this is what she heard. "Yes, the painting is very beautiful, but you are more beautiful than the Mona Lisa. I wish somebody would paint your picture. I would buy it and look at it all day. Alas, if only I had the courage to talk to you." Wendy didn't usually listen to other people's thoughts. She thought it was rude, even though the other people didn't know she was listening. Besides, most people's thoughts were usually boring. Xavier was getting too nervous standing next to her. He moved on to another painting. Wendy followed him. She listened to the lonely man's thoughts. They weren't boring at all. Most of his thoughts were about her, but she also learned a few other things. He liked to read. His favorite author was Charles Dickens. He loved animals, especially dogs. "That painting reminds me of a book," said Wendy. "A Tale of Two Cities" by Charles Dickens. Have you read it?" "Yes," Xavier blurted, a little too loudly. "It's my favorite book. I've read everything Dickens has ever written, twice. My favorite part is when—" He suddenly stopped, very embarrassed. "Please go on," said Wendy. "No, I don't want to bother you," said Xavier. "You're not bothering me," said Wendy. "Charles Dickens is my favorite author. I sometimes read aloud to my dog." "You have a dog?" asked Xavier. Wendy nodded. Xavier stared into her dark eyes. "I love dogs," he said, as his brain said, "I love you." Wendy and Xavier spent the afternoon together. He could hardly stop talking. It was like a genie had escaped from a bottle. All the love and emotion that had been buried for so long inside him came pouring out on Wendy. "I don't even know your name," he suddenly blurted. "Wendy Nogard," said Wendy. "I'm Xavier Dalton," said Xavier. They shook hands and made plans to meet again at the museum the following week. On her way home, Wendy stopped by the library and checked out A Tale of Two Cities. Then she went to the pet store and bought a dog. A month later, Xavier asked her to marry him. Wendy didn't know what to say. She loved Xavier, and she knew he loved her, but she still hadn't told him about her ear. The one on top of her head, I mean. He knew about the other two. He had nibbled on each of them. "Marriage is a big step," she said. "I'm afraid we haven't known each other long enough." "I've known you long enough to know I could never be happy without you," said Xavier. "Before I met you, Wendy, I was sad and lonely, but I was used to it. Now I can't imagine living like that again. I don't know what I'd do without you." He stroked her hair. "Well, there's one little thing you don't know about me," said Wendy. His hands bumped into it. "What's this thing?" he asked. "That's what I was going to tell you about, dear," said Wendy. Xavier parted Wendy's hair and looked at it. "It's an ear!" he exclaimed. "Yes, it is," said Wendy. "Some people have 2 ears. I have 3. Now that you know, if you still want to marry me, my answer is yes. Yes, sweetheart, yes." "I love you," said Xavier. "That's all that matters to me." That was what he said, but this is what he was thinking. "Ugh, gross! You're disgusting! I never want you to touch me again. I can't even stand to look at you. You tricked me, you freak, you monster." And of course, Wendy heard every word. He stood up. "I'll be right back, sweetheart. I bought you a diamond earring as an engagement present. I just need to run back to the jewelry store and buy one more." He hurried out the door. She never saw him again. I'm sorry to say this story has a sad ending. Xavier, thanks to Wendy, got over his shyness. He went out with lots of women, but broke each one's heart. He could never love any of them. There was a hole in his heart. He was in love with Wendy Nogard, but he didn't know. And so he could never be happy. Wendy became a bitter and evil person. She was unhappy, and she wanted everyone else to be unhappy too. Whenever she heard someone thinking happy thoughts, she would listen closely and then do and say just the right thing to make the person feel rotten. She hated children the most. Every time she passed a playground, she heard them laughing and having fun. So she became a substitute teacher. Chapter 24, Glum and Blah. Miss Nogard entered the classroom on the 30th story. She looked at the bright and chipper faces. She knew by the end of the day they would no longer be bright and chipper. They would be glum and blah. She smiled at the class. "Good morning, everybody," she said. "My name is Miss Nogard." She listened to their brains. Calvin had spilled orange juice on his lap during breakfast and worried that someone might think he had gone to the bathroom in his pants. Dana had gotten her hair cut yesterday, and she thought it was too short. She was afraid it made her look like a boy. She was especially sensitive to this because Dana was sometimes a boy's name. Jason was mad at his older brother, Justin. Justin was in high school. Justin always got good grades and was a star in everything he did. Compared to Justin, Jason felt like a loser. "What's so great about high school?" he had asked this morning. "My school is higher than yours." DJ had heard a song on the radio on his way to school. He hated the song, but it kept playing over and over again in his head. Bebe had an itch on her leg. Miss Nogard smiled. The bad stuff always rose to the top of the brain. Even if a person was very excited about something wonderful, the person still worried about what could go wrong. Jenny was going horseback riding after school if it didn't rain. She had never gone horseback riding before. She hoped she wouldn't fall off the horse. Miss Nogard clapped her hands. "So who would like to tell me what you've been working on?" she asked. A few hands went up in the air. Oh, said Mac. "How about the boy in the orange and purple shirt?" said Miss Nogard. Everybody looked around. "The handsome young man sitting right there," said Miss Nogard. Dana looked at her shirt. It was orange and purple. She pointed at herself and mouthed a word. "Me?" "Yes, you," said Miss Nogard. Dana's face turned red hot. "I'm a girl," she said. Everybody laughed. "Oh, I'm so embarrassed," said Miss Nogard, with her hand over her heart. "It's not your fault," said Dana. "It's my stupid haircut. I hate it." "Oh no," said Miss Nogard. "You look adorable. I see now that you're a very pretty girl." "I'm ugly," muttered Dana. She buried her head under her arms. "I'd better call on someone else," said Miss Nogard. Suddenly, out of nowhere, a brain screamed, "Don't call on me! Whatever you do, please don't call on me!" It came from Benjamin Nushmut. "How about you?" said Miss Nogard, looking right at him. "Just don't ask me my name," thought Benjamin. "I never can say my name in front of people." He took a breath to steady himself. "Well, we've been reading." "First, tell me your name," Miss Nogard said sweetly. The muscles in Benjamin's face tightened. He concentrated real hard, then said, "Benjamin Nushmut." "I beg your pardon?" said Miss Nogard. "Benjamin Nushmut," he repeated. "Henderson Schmidt?" asked Miss Nogard. Benjamin sighed. "Benjamin Nushmut," he shouted. "I'm sorry," said Miss Nogard. "I must have been distracted. What did you say?" Benjamin pressed his lips together. He tried to speak, but his mouth wouldn't open. "His name is Benjamin," said Jason. "Benjamin Nushmut." "Thank you," said Miss Nogard. "That's a very nice name, Benjamin. You shouldn't be ashamed of it." Benjamin covered his red face with his hands. She turned to Jason. "You look familiar. Do I know you?" "I don't think so," said Jason. She stared at him as if she were trying to remember. "You're Justin, right?" "I'm Jason. Justin's my older brother." "So you're Justin's baby brother," said Miss Nogard. Everybody laughed. "I remember Justin. I substituted for his class once. He was the brightest student I ever taught. You must feel very lucky to have such an exceptional brother." "His feet stink," thought Jason. For the rest of the day, Miss Nogard kept accidentally, on purpose, calling Jason Justin. One by one, she made every child in the class feel miserable. She called Calvin to her desk and asked in a whisper if he had to use the restroom. Whenever she passed DJ, she hummed the song stuck in his head. Whenever BB finally stopped thinking about her itch, Miss Nogard would walk by and scratch her own leg. It looks like it might rain, she said as she stared out the window at the bright blue sky. Darn, I'll never get to go horseback riding, thought Jenny. I have a nephew who went horseback riding on a day like this, said Miss Nogard. There wasn't a cloud in the sky. Then suddenly, out of nowhere, it started thundering and lightning. It spooked the horse terribly. What happened to your nephew? Asked Jenny. Oh, he's fine, said Miss Nogard. He just broke both of his arms and legs. He'll be in a cast for a year. But he has a very positive attitude. That's the important thing. Remember always, keep a positive attitude. By the end of the day, nobody had a positive attitude. The whole class was glum and blah. The children walked out of the school building, heads down, except Jenny, who looked up at the sky, worrying about the weather, although she didn't know if she was more worried about rain or sunshine. Even DJ was frowning. What's the matter? Asked Louis, the art teacher. Nothing, muttered DJ. I guess I just had a bad day. Don't you like your new teacher? Asked Louis. She's real nice, said Dana. It's not her fault I'm the ugliest girl in the world. I like her a lot, said Jason. It's my brother I hate. Me too, said Benjamin. I hate myself. Louis rubbed his upper lip. His mustache was beginning to grow back. What's her name? He asked. Miss Nogard, said Bibi as she scratched the back of her leg raw. Are you sure? Asked Louis. Huh? Asked Bibi. I mean, said Louis, are you sure it's Miss Nogard, not Mrs. Nogard? I think, said Bibi. Why? Louis just shrugged. Chapter 25, Guilty. Some of the children were working in their workbooks. Others were reading in their readers. And still others were computing on the computer. Miss Nogard looked from one to another. Eeny, meeny, miny, Mauritia, she thought. Mauritia was stamping a stamp. Mauritia, said Miss Nogard, will you come here, please? Mauritia walked to the front of the room. Yes, she said cheerfully. Don't yes me, young lady, said Miss Nogard. You know what you did. Mauritia looked back at her teacher. What did I do? She wondered. Miss Nogard waited patiently. Everyone was guilty of something. I didn't do anything, did I? Thought Mauritia. I've been good, I think. Unless she found out about that dictionary page I accidentally tore. No, she couldn't know about that. It happened before she even got here. And I don't think anybody saw me do it. I didn't do anything, she said. I probably should have told Mrs. Jules about it, she realized. But it wasn't even my fault. I was looking up how to spell journey for my journal, and the page just ripped all by itself. It is one thing to do something wrong, Mauritia, said Miss Nogard, but when you do, you should admit to it. We all make mistakes, but when you lie about it, you make matters much worse for yourself. Mauritia nodded as she tried to figure out what to do. If Miss Nogard knew she tore the dictionary page, then of course she should admit to it. But there was no way Miss Nogard could know. It was impossible. I don't know what you mean, she said innocently. I didn't do anything wrong. She smiled at her teacher. Miss Nogard stared at her a long moment, then said, Will you please bring me the dictionary? The smile dropped off Mauritia's face and crashed on the floor. The dictionary lay on top of the bookcase. Mauritia numbly went after it. How could she know? She wondered. It's impossible. Maybe she just wants to look up a word. She carried the heavy book back to Miss Nogard. Thank you, Mauritia, said Miss Nogard, flipping through the pages. I need to look up journey. Mauritia couldn't take it any longer. I ripped it, she cried out. I tore the dictionary. I'm sorry. I don't even know how it happened. I was just turning the page, really. Maybe pages only have a certain amount of turns in them, like 999. Then when you turn the page for the 1000th time, it will rip no matter who turns it. Miss Nogard sadly shook her head. I'm very disappointed in you, she said. Not only did you vandalize the dictionary, but then you lied about it. I thought I could trust you, Mauritia. I guess I was wrong. I'm a horrible person, Mauricia agreed. I'm sorry. Don't apologize to me, said Miss Snowguard. It's not my dictionary. It belongs to the class. Mauricia had to stand in front of the class and tell them she was sorry. Then, since nobody would ever be able to use that page again, she had to read it aloud to the class. She struggled through the difficult words like journalism and judicious. Speak up, Miss Snowguard had to keep reminding her. And everyone needs to pay close attention, because there will be a test on it when Mauricia has finished. Hey, that's not fair, complained Jason. We didn't rip the dictionary. Why should we be punished? It's not punishment, said Miss Snowguard. It is for your own good. Since you can no longer use that page, you need to memorize it. Thanks a lot, Mauricia, griped Jenny. When Mauricia finished reading it, Miss Snowguard made her turn the page over and read the back side of it, too. But I only ripped the front, said Mauricia, not the back. She finished, then returned to her seat, angry and upset. She wasn't angry at Miss Snowguard. Miss Snowguard was just being fair, she thought. But there was only one way Miss Snowguard could have known about the torn page, she realized. Somebody in the class must have seen her tear it and then tattled on her. She looked around the room. From Dee Dee to Todd to Terrence to Joy, she didn't trust any of them. One of her friends was a no-good, dirty, double-crossing snake in the grass. And that is where we will stop for today. Come back tomorrow to hear the last few chapters of Wayside School. It Gets a Little Stranger. See you later.